Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Breakdown podcast. I'm Jack George Maynard, a news and blog writer for F1 Breakdown. And the 2013 season is well among us. We've had the first two races of the season. And, well, they've not been without controversial topics so far this season. Obviously, Malaysia we'll get onto with the Mark Webber, Sebastian Vettel overtaking move. And we'll talk about the Australian Grand Prix in the next 15 minutes and what we can already conclude from the start of the season. So, looking at Malaysia, obviously the most recent Grand Prix that we've had, Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel obviously dominated it, and you could tell by the body language on the podium when Vettel crossed the line and he won the race that you could tell they were not at ease with each other after an alleged team order to Sebastian Vettel not to overtake Mark Webber. Mark Webber was apparently on a lower fuel mode, probably leaner than Sebastian Vettel was due to fuel troubles, but they were told not to overtake. They were told that they would race up to the final pit stop. Mark Webber was ahead in that final pit stop, so effectively the race was run in Red Bull's eyes. But, as they say, Sebastian Vettel took it into his own hands, raced Mark Webber through the pit straight and up to turn 4. And, yeah, basically, Red Bull, Christian Horner was not happy at all. The radio messages coming across that it was a silly move. But looking at it from a racing driver's point of view, I'm not a racing driver, but, you know, we've all had racing driving moments. If you're a Formula 1 fan or a racing fan in general, we've all had racing driving experience. You understand why Vettel obviously would go and overtake Mark Webber, because everybody wants to win. You always want to win. If you're competitive and you want to win championships, you want to win. You don't want to finish second. And plus, with Vettel, I don't know if he cement a number one position, like being said in Red Bull, but with how the team's been run and how Dr. Helmut Marko's been talking about, Mark Webber saying that he's not consistent and, loving smashing Vettel, which I've criticised him for, you can sort of see that in his head he feels that why should he be behind the number 2 driver if he's feeling that he's number 1 in his head? He might not, he might think that in his head might not come across in the media that it's number 1 because they've got the PR people who tell him virtually what to say in front of the cameras. But you never know, in his head he might think, I'm the number 1 driver in this team, I've won 3 championships, Mark Webber hasn't won a championship, why should I stay behind him? So you can see why Vettel might have done it, but yes, it was wrong because he's gone against team orders, and they did race quite heavily, but you saw that Mark Webber, even though he knew Vettel was racing him, he did defend quite aggressively, I thought. He didn't, not aggressive as obviously some people have, but he did try and force him up the pit wall to try and make him back out. But what was interesting, that into turn 2, because there's that right and then straight lock, straight full right lock and straight left lock, like a mini chicane you could call it, or 2 hairpins. But Mark Webber, by the end of turn 2, was ahead of Sebastian Vettel. And you could have said to Sebastian on the radio there, that's it, done, you're not racing him, don't even challenge him up to turn 4. Because that was the next overtaking opportunity. But obviously Sebastian Vettel did, and Mark Webber didn't, how I thought, just gave it quits and just was not happy whatsoever. And didn't challenge him because he could have forced him out wide. But if he forced him out wide, he could have gone off the track, he could have picked up rubbish, he could have got a puncher, and the team throw away a possible 43 points. So, looking at that side, you can see why Webber sort of let him through it, whereas if it was Kimi Raikkonen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, he might have pushed a little bit harder. My opinion on the matter, yes, Vettel shouldn't have done it. He knew, he was told. Obviously, Mark Webber says at the end of in the podium, not on the podium ceremony, but on the little sofa where they meet before they go on the podium, multi-21, which Christian Horner has said that multi-21 means car number 2 ahead of car number 1, and if they hear multi-12, it's car number 1 ahead of car number 2 for the end of the race. And apparently that was said over team radio, and that's why Mark Webber was unhappy, because car 2 was ahead of car 1, and that's how it should have stayed, in his opinion. You could tell on the podium as well, when Mark Webber was speaking to Martin Brundle, that he said that Sebastian would always get protection as usual. Now, a lot of people have come out and said various things about Vettel should be suspended for a race, or should be heavily fined, or Red Bull should do something in order to show Vettel that what he did was wrong. But obviously nothing yet has been said. But then apparently the row has been settled, according to BBC Sport, between the two drivers. But yet people have said that if people disobeyed team orders, there was fines, there was suspensions. They were knocked down a peg or two, basically, the driver. But nothing seems to have happened. Maybe something has happened behind closed doors that obviously we won't know. But nothing's been said. No fine has been mentioned by the media, because the media are quite good at finding out what has been said behind closed doors, because they won't rest until they know. But we don't know yet, and we don't know if there has been any contact behind closed doors. There probably has, but nothing that has been significant in order to break out into a huge news story. So, and that's why people have maybe criticised Christian Horner for being quite a weak team principal, for letting the driver be ahead of the team in a sense. But people have retracted those statements that they've said, and yeah, it's not pretty and it's not too good for the sport at the moment. But it creates such an interesting dilemma for the rest of the season, because will Mark Webber help Sebastian Vettel? I doubt that he didn't help him at the best of times in the first place. So I wouldn't, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if these two collide in the season, whether it's in the near future or whether they block each other in qualifying. Fernando Alonso did that to Lewis Hamilton, if you can remember, back in the 2007 season, in I think it was the Hungarian Grand Prix qualifier session. He had the pit stops, they changed the tyres, he had enough fuel in, they could obviously refuel back in the pit lane at that time. And the lollipop man lifted up his lollipop, and Fernando Alonso stayed there until the last possible second. And that means he left, that means he had enough time to do a lap and do a qualifying time. But Hamilton behind him did not have enough time to do a qualifying lap. And so you could tell that I think something like that between Vettel and Webber will happen similar, whereas Mark Webber might be not on the flying lap and Vettel might be, and he won't give way, basically. So he holds up Sebastian Vettel. Something on these lines I think could happen in the near future between these two. And also that goes back to my question that Mark Webber could have left Red Bull in the summer. There was interest from Ferrari to replace Felipe Massa, and Felipe Massa at the moment was on fantastic form, and at the moment I can't see Ferrari dropping Felipe Massa at the end of the season. He's out-qualified Fernando Alonso twice, he's been racing very well, picked up some good points, so Felipe Massa looks like he's back. So there was a chance for Webber, when he was not back, not on top form, to jump into that Ferrari seat, but he didn't do it. He signed for Red Bull, and look what's happened. He still probably feels like he's still the number 2 driver, still not treated equally in the team. And it begs the question that why didn't you leave? That was my question that I put in the blog. I thought, with all the interest and all the bad things Red Bull have been saying about you and all the good things Ferrari have been saying to you, and he said that there was interest and talks between Ferrari. It's just like, how hard was it to possibly sign for Ferrari? It was a confusing one in my opinion, because Webber had the chance to leave and had the chance to be equal. I don't know if he would have been equal, but had a chance not to, things like this not to happen at Red Bull anymore. Things not to be badly said, because Ferrari respected Mark Webber. So that is also my theory, that he should have left, and I stand by that. My sayings. That was mainly it for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Obviously, it was a good race as well. We had the Mercedes boys, Hamilton finishing ahead of Rosberg, team orders that they stuck to, which obviously Rosberg was unhappy about, finishing 4th when he thought he was faster than Hamilton. But they wanted to bring the cars home, and Rosberg was very stern and strict to Nico Rosberg, and Nico Rosberg stayed behind. That's when you give out a team order. That's what you should do, in a sense, is stick with the team, because at the end of the day the team employs you, not yourself. You're not self-employed. Looking at Australia then, obviously Kimi Raikkonen winning, which was great for Lotus, but they were a bit off the pace in Malaysia, which hopefully, I don't want Lotus to be one of those teams where it depends on the circuit layout whether they'll be well or not. I think it was more of a tyre and a setup issue that was wrong in Malaysia, but we'll see in China, because it's still early days. But they played it fantastically on a 2-stop strategy in Australia to get Raikkonen to win the Grand Prix, while everyone else went on a 3-stop. So hopefully Lotus can be up there challenging, because we need a few extra challenges, because I think Red Bull is still the quickest car overall, even though but Mercedes are coming up, Ferrari up there and thereabouts. They kind of trod over themselves. and Alonso making that mistake in turn 2, hitting Vettel. So you don't know where Alonso could have been in that race. McLaren are nowhere, so we need an extra challenger. So hopefully Lotus can challenge Red Bull in order for the title, basically, for the constructors and the drivers. Looking back at the Australian Grand Prix, Sutil had an amazing start to the season. What a comeback to lead the race, to be, lapping faster than Sebastian Vettel on a used set of prime tyres when he was on a new set. Was a great achievement, and they tried to undercut Sutil by pitting Vettel early, but they pitted at the same time as Sutil, so Vettel still had to overtake Sutil on track, which he did, but full credit to Adrian Sutil. And if it wasn't for the tyre issue that they had at the end, bringing him in too early for the super soft, he could have scored a few more points because he was overtaken because it's just a pure lack of grip. But my theory is for Force India, with Sutil looking great and with the rest of being outperformed last year by Nico Hulkenberg, it doesn't look good for the rest because he wants to move forward in Formula 1. He wants to become a more established top team runner. But if he keeps being outperformed by his teammates, yes, the rest did well in Malaysia by outperforming Sutil, but with Sutil leading a race and Sutil matching the leaders in the Force India in his first race back, in my opinion, Adrian Sutil is still ahead of Paul di Resta in the driver teammate challenge thing, and you're always judged against your teammate. So in that sense, di Resta really has to find another gear or two, and I think he knows that in order to try and secure a seat, because he was looked over for Sergio Perez for the McLaren seat, and even Nico Hulkenberg might have been ahead of him for that seat. So di Resta really needs to try and get hold and bring Sutil down and overtake him and be quicker than him. Looking also then at Marussia, another teammate challenge with Max Chilton, obviously had all that testing time, but then Jules Bianchi seems to have jumped in the car and is just completely outperforming him, being about a second a lap quicker in qualifying, which is another worry for Chilton, because with your teammate outperforming you so much in the space of 2 races, he was able to keep up with the slow-moving Williams, whereas Chilton was far at the back fighting with Guido van der Garde in Australia. So with Bianchi much further at the field, qualifying at a much faster pace with such a limited amount of time in the car, it just goes to show you, Chilton might have an uphill struggle this year, which is a shame for an English driver. But if this was to go on past experience, Chilton might not make it to next season if this carries on, which is a big struggle for him, considering how hard he's worked to get into Formula 1. Because as they say, it's hard to get into Formula 1, it's just as hard to stay in it. And Bianchi looks like he's a driver that will stay in, and he could be up there in a reasonably quick car within the next couple of years. So I think Bianchi, if he carries on at this rate, he will be definitely a young driver looking good for the future. That's it mainly on this podcast. I'm running out of time. I've got about 2 minutes to go. So looking ahead to China, still we don't know what the pecking order will be. We think Red Bull will be there, but we don't know anything really else apart from probably the bottom 2 teams of where everyone will qualify, because Toro Rosso's, they seem to be slow, but the car looks good, it looks planted, it looks like it's got downforce, it's just slow, so they just need to find the speed, and they've had a 3-week gap between Malaysia and China to try and find some speed. Williams will want to improve, teams will want to improve, Sauber got to improve the reliability, but the grid is so tightly compact that a tenth or a second found over can make a huge difference going into China. So quick predictions in my last 55 seconds. It's too hard. I'm just going to go by team names. I think Red Bull will be at the front again. I think Mercedes will be battling with Ferrari for probably 3rd and 4th places, and maybe a Lotus taking up the 5th and 6th positions, but I can't really put names down because still it's just too early. I think those will be the top 4 teams challenging in which is obviously the top 4 teams at the moment in Formula 1. Apart from that is it for this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, of course, and I'll see you later.